Since I was little, I knew something was off. My parents, Richard and Susan, always made it clear who the princess of the family was: my younger sister, Emily. While she was showered with affection, I felt like nothing more than an obligation. If Emily wanted a new toy, my dad would rush out to buy it. If she broke something in the house, my mom would just laugh and say, "Oh, kids, right?" But if I made the smallest mistake, even by accident, I'd get scolded immediately. Over time, I realized that to them I wasn't a priority, just a useful piece in the household. At school, I gave it my all. I got good grades, helped with assignments, did everything I could to make my parents proud. But the most I ever got was a nod or a cold, "That's what's expected of you." Meanwhile, Emily didn't even have to try. Just existing was enough for her to be adored. As the years passed, the difference in treatment only became more obvious. Her birthdays were grand celebrations, huge parties, expensive gifts, the whole family gathered. Mine? A store-bought cake and a half-hearted happy birthday, as if it were just another chore. But the worst part came when I turned 16 and got my first job. My parents didn't show any pride or happiness. Quite the opposite. That's when everything changed. For the worse. "Now that you're working, you can help with the household bills," my mom said casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. In that moment, I had no idea that those words would mark the beginning of years of exploitation. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was an ATM. After that conversation with my mother, my life became an endless cycle of work and obligation. My salary, I never even saw it. The moment I got paid, my mother already had a list of bills I needed to cover: electricity, water, groceries. Even Emily's whims became my responsibility. "Your sister needs a new dress for the school dance. You can help, can't you?" my mother would say in that sweet voice that turned ice cold if I hesitated. And if I ever tried to refuse, I was accused of being ungrateful. "We raised you, gave you a roof over your head. You think you can just keep your money while we struggle to keep this house?" I swallowed my words, but inside I felt a growing resentment. I watched as Emily flaunted new clothes and the latest smartphone while I couldn't even buy anything for myself. Maybe once I leave home, things will change. But I underestimated my family's ability to keep me trapped in that life. When I turned 18, I tried saving up to leave, to finally attend the college I had always dreamed of. But my parents always found a way to keep me there. There was always an urgent expense, an unexpected financial crisis. One day, I finally gathered the courage to say, "I want to keep a little of my salary for myself." Silence filled the room. My father shot me a cold stare. My mother let out a dramatic sigh as if I had just said the most horrible thing in the world. Emily, lounging on the couch, rolled her eyes. "So that's it? You want to abandon your family?" That night, I cried silently in my room. I felt trapped, suffocated, with no way out. But deep in my heart, something changed. I knew I had to find a way to escape that prison. What I didn't know was that fate was already preparing a twist that would change everything. I knew that if I stayed in that house, my life would never change. My parents had turned me into some sort of financial servant, and Emily, well, she would always be their untouchable princess. But deep down, I had a plan. I had always been good with numbers and organization. Even though I couldn't save my salary, I started learning about investments and finance through free videos on the internet. Late at night, while my family slept, I read articles about saving money, investing, and even how to start a small business. The first step was the hardest: finding a way to save money without my parents finding out. So, I did something risky. At the time, I was working as an assistant at an office. Instead of depositing my paycheck into the family's joint account, I secretly opened my own bank account. Little by little, I started setting money aside. At first, it was just $20, then $50, then $100. The real challenge was keeping it hidden from my parents. My mother had a habit of inspecting my finances, so I had to be careful. I'd tell her my paycheck was delayed or that deductions had been made. And to my surprise, it worked. That's when I came across a golden opportunity. A coworker mentioned an online entrepreneurship course. The price was steep for me at the time, but I knew it could be my way out. Without thinking too much, I used my savings and enrolled. The course taught me how to create digital businesses, something I never thought was possible for someone like me. But as I learned, I realized I could do it. And so, my first project was born, an online store selling personalized eye accessories. At first, it was a disaster. I sold only 2 products in my first month and almost gave up. But something inside me told me I couldn't turn back. I kept studying, improving my marketing, and learning about social media. By the second month, I sold 10 products. By the third, 30. And by the 6th month, I was earning more from my store than from my office job. That's when I made the decision that would change my life forever. That night, I sat at the dinner table and announced, "I'm moving out." The silence was deafening. My father frowned. My mother let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Move out? And go where? You think you can survive on your own?" Emily, as always, rolled her eyes. "Well, if you're not paying the bills anymore, I guess that means more money for me," she said with disdain. That hit me like a knife. They weren't worried about me, just about the money they were losing. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I already rented a small apartment. I'm moving out. At the end of the month. For the first time, I saw desperation in my mother's eyes. "You can't do this. You owe us everything." But my mind was made up. What I didn't know was that this decision would lead to a twist no one saw coming. The day I left home, my mother looked at me like I was a traitor. My father refused to say goodbye. Emily didn't even get up from the couch. "You'll be back in less than a month," my mother said coldly. "Once you realize you can't survive without us." I held back my tears and walked away. My new home was a small rented apartment, simple, but mine. For the first time, I felt like my life was truly in my hands. The first few months were a mix of fear and excitement. I was still working at the office, but my online store was growing fast. I reinvested every penny of profit back into the business, expanding, creating new products, and learning everything I could about marketing. And then it happened. One of my personalized accessories went viral on social media. A well-known influencer posted a picture wearing my product, and overnight, my store exploded. In a single week, I made more sales than I had in the entire year. It was surreal. I could barely keep up with the orders. I had to hire help, increase production, and create a more professional website. Within a few months, my store was making thousands of dollars a month. And for the first time in my life, I was rich. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the feeling that I had finally won. I had proven to myself that I was capable. And then, as if they could smell success from miles away, my parents reappeared. First, it was a casual message from my mother. "Hey, sweetheart, how are you? We miss you." I ignored it. I knew it wasn't real concern. Then, my father followed up. "Your mother and I were talking, and we think it would be nice for you to come visit. After all, family is everything, right?" And then, just as I expected, came the real reason they were reaching out. "Emily is going through some financial struggles. Do you think you could help her out a little?" They had no shame. Not even an attempt to disguise their intentions. They had ignored me, exploited me, doubted me, and now they wanted my money. That's when I realized I didn't need them. They needed me. So I made a decision that would leave my family in complete shock. For a moment, I stared at my mother's message on my phone. "Emily is going through financial difficulties. Do you think you could help her out a little?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips. After everything they had done, now they were asking for help? I, the invisible daughter, the one who only existed to pay the bills, was now supposed to be the solution to the princess's problems? I left the message unanswered. But as expected, they weren't going to give up that easily. The following week, I got an unexpected call. Hey, sweetheart. My mother's sugary voice sounded fake from the other end of the line. What do you want? I asked bluntly. She sighed, as if I were ungrateful for not pretending everything was fine. Your father and I want to see you. We miss you. Can we stop by this weekend? My parents had never stepped foot in my apartment, never once showed interest in how I was doing since I left. But now, after finding out I was doing well, better than them, in fact, they suddenly wanted to reconnect? Fine. Come over on Saturday, I replied, curious to see just how far they would go. On Saturday, I opened the door, and there they were. My father, stone-faced. My mother, forcing a smile. And Emily. Well, Emily looked nothing like the spoiled girl I once knew. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, wearing clothes that, by her standards, were far too simple. Wow. What a nice place, my mother said, looking around my luxurious apartment. Very different from your old life, huh? My father added, his tone laced with mockery. I gestured for them to sit, but I remained standing. Let's cut to the chase. What do you want? My mother feigned offense. Daughter, is that any way to talk to your family? Can't we just want to see you? Drop the act, I interrupted. If that were true, you would have reached out sooner. You want money, just admit it. She opened her mouth to deny it, but Emily was faster. Yes, we need money, she said impatiently. My car broke down, I lost my job, and you have so much now. It wouldn't even make a difference for you to help. Your sister. That was my final wake-up call. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. My mother shot Emily a look, as if she had ruined the performance, but it was too late. So that's how it is, I murmured. I was never anything more than an ATM to you. My mother started to protest, but I raised my hand, cutting off any attempt at manipulation. When I was working to support you, there was no family is everything. I was being exploited. When I decided to leave, I was called ungrateful. But now that I'm a millionaire, suddenly you remember I exist? Silence filled the room. I don't owe you anything, I continued. Everything I achieved, I did on my own. And guess what? I'm not giving you a single cent. My mother's eyes widened. You can't be serious. You're refusing to help your own sister, my father snapped. Emily glared at me, arms crossed. You're being selfish, you know that. After everything our parents did for you. I laughed in disbelief. Everything they did for, me? They drained me dry. And when I needed support, they turned their backs on me. Now it's my turn to do the same. My father stood up, his face red with anger. If that's how you want to play it, then forget you have a family. I met his gaze without blinking. I forgot a long time ago. And with nothing more to say, I walked to the door and opened it. You can leave now. My mother made one last attempt to plead, but my father grabbed her arm. Emily shot me a hateful look and stormed out. Without another word. I shut the door behind them and, for the first time in my life, felt at peace. I was free. In the months that followed, I never reached out to them. And as expected, they never tried to contact me again. My business continued to grow, and a year later, I expanded into a larger office. I hired employees and started traveling the world. And the irony? I later found out that Emily had moved back in with my parents because she couldn't support herself. My father lost his job. My mother sank into debt, and without someone to fund their lavish lifestyle, they were forced into a very different life than they were used to. And me? I was wealthy, independent, and happy. Without them. Moral of the story: never let anyone treat you like an endless resource. Some people only value you when they realize they can't use you anymore.